Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Parthaya Pradibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Puranumanina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manutsandadami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharatataila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Thank you all for joining us again. Tonight, Krishna will complete his description of the people who have what is called Asuri Sampat, or we have translated it kind of roughly in English as demonic mental constitution. Demonic sounds a little kind of too much, actually. Because you shouldn't visualize a demon in your mind. It means they're kind of just subhuman tendencies that we all have. And if we don't have them now, we must have had them before. Maybe there was a time when we had no respect for religious scriptures. We were not at all interested in spirituality. I know there was a time for me like that. And I wasn't interested in self-realized beings either. So these all go into the category of demonic qualities. So we all were there at one point or another. And such people they might even perform rituals, but not following the scriptural instructions. And they would do it only to show off, to get attention, or maybe to compete with other people. They don't want to be outdone by anybody. And compared to Lord Krishna's words in the Gita proper, some commentaries, like Jnanadev's commentary, may feel a bit too graphic or too much fire and brimstone for some people, because it's kind of a caricature of those people, the demonic people. And but he's been consistently making a caricature of all these people. Not just this chapter, but the whole Gita. His commentary is kind of overdone in some ways, but that's what makes it kind of fun. He's doing it intentionally, I believe. And or it might just be that in the village that he was living in 750 years ago, which is called Alandi, maybe that village was full of bad people, and he was talking about actual people in his life. Whatever it is, it was a small village, 2,000 people, probably uneducated farmers, so that's where his commentary is coming from. So we have to take it in that context. And we may also think that this section of the Gita is rather irrelevant for most of us because we're simply not as bad as the people that Krishna describes. It's true. But Krishna's point is that the same qualities that lead people to be extremely harmful to society are in us as well. Recognizing that is a very important part of this teaching. And because the only difference is one of degree. You know, they're way up here and we're down here, but we're not. It's like having a little bit of COVID, not a whole lot of COVID. It's still COVID. So naturally, there's no point in trying to convince a serial killer to forgo his evil ways. But if we visualize our own anger, selfishness, arrogance getting amplified like 10 times, 20 times, we might just end up in the demonic category. So we're not that far away. We have it, it's just not that bad yet, or it's gotten better from the past. So why would we knowingly allow such negative tendencies a safe haven in our mind? That is the question, you know. That's what Krishna is trying to say. Why do you even allow these things to be there in the first place? This is where they're heading, taking you over there. So it's like harboring a fugitive instead of evicting him. Even still, you know, we have some bizarre attachment to a few of our, you know, lower tendencies, and each person is different. You know, we have different attachments. Say, seems harmless, but like on holidays, some people might be tempted to just wear their pajamas all day without taking a bath. And it's like, I'm gonna be tamasic. I'm just gonna be dirty today or something like that. I mean, little kids like to do that. They don't want to take a shower. So when we kind of go back to that habit, we might spend the day like that. It's not evil, you know, it's not a demonic thing, but it obviously increases the tamas, the indolence in our mind, or inertia. So maybe even getting out of bed and after getting out of bed and after taking a shower, some people may start their spiritual practices without even making their bed. Now, I think that is much more common, but it still wouldn't be considered very sattvic. It wouldn't be considered very, proper for a spiritual seeker. So I'll tell you a little story of mine. It was some years back, and we were at a devotee's house, and Amma's program was going to start the next day, so we had like a half day off. And so we got to bed early, woke up early, and I could actually sit down quietly and do my archana without having to worry about the time. And so I was just about to start archana, and for some reason I remembered something, and I had to open my bag. And I unzipped it, and I took something, and then after that I started the archana. And, it took, 45 minutes or something like that, because I was doing it, just savoring it. And my roommates were two senior Swamis, Swami Amritatmananda ji and Swami Pranavamritananda ji. And Pranavamritananda Swami came to me once I finished archana, and he says, I can't believe you. I thought you had more shraddha, more attention to detail. Now, this morning you showed me that I was wrong. And I was like, what happened? What's wrong? He says, before you started archana, you opened your zipper. And then, without closing the zipper, you started archana. How did you get any concentration without returning the zipper back the way it was? And I was like, wow. He really has a lot of attention to detail. And for whatever reason, I didn't close the zipper. Believe me, now, I always close the zipper just because it was such a deep impression on my mind. Now, during tour, obviously, it's going to be difficult to follow all the rules. We might have to stay up all night long with no chance to shower, or, you just have to eat really quickly because you don't have time, or trying to stay awake, doing funny things, whatever it might be. But that's understandable. It's a different situation. I've also,
we understand that. Once there was a really funny scene when it was on my 60th birthday, and it was in Puri, and it was the last day, the last darshan of the 3 days of celebrations. Everybody was exhausted, and I actually fell asleep somewhere in the middle of the darshan. But there were people who were needed even more and were, local Malayalis, and they can do a lot of more things that we can sometimes. And this brahmachari brother of mine, we met after the sun rose. I think it was a while after. Anyhow, I was hungry. That's all I remember. And so I went and I found the dining hall, and I got some idlis. They were serving idlis. Idlis are these kind of like rice cakes that are steamed rice cakes. And he was eating the same thing. We just use our hands. And then so I said, "Did you get any sleep?" This is while we're eating. And he says, "No, not a wink." And I said, "What about, did you change your clothes?" "How can I change my clothes?" And then I said, "So what about toothbrushing? You're eating now. Did you brush your teeth?" He says, "I'm using the idlis to brush my teeth." It's like, oh, that's a good idea. I should have thought of that. So anyhow, we would normally call that very tamasic. It's not fit for a seeker, but emergency situation, and so it's okay. All right, we're going to hear more about this. Today we're going to conclude Krishna's description of these people and understand why he's so particular about emphasizing these things. Verse 18. Ahankaram balam darpam kamam krodhancha samshritaha mamatma paradeheshu pradvishanto vyasuyakaha pradvishanto vyasuyakaha. Now we'll chant it all together. Ahankaram balam darpam kamam krodhancha samshritaha mamatma paradeheshu pradvishanto vyasuyakaha. Today's verses, I think I have taken quite a few liberties. We'll see. Given over to egoism, power, haughtiness, kama, and anger, these detractors hate me, the self within, in their own bodies and those of others. So without slowing down, given over to egoism, power, haughtiness, desire or kama, and anger, these detractors hate me, the self within, their own bodies and those of others. So we'll go through the usual commentaries as well. Shankaracharya, he says this word egoism, it's kind of like it's not a deep Vedantic philosophical ego, like separate from God, like that. It's just the rudimentary, the common, usage of that word. And he explains it by saying, they esteem themselves very high for qualities they have, as well as qualities that they falsely attribute to themselves. This egoism is what is called avidya, ignorance. And it is the hardest thing to overcome. See, that first part was the normal meaning. Now he's using the word ahamkara as that deep meaning in the sense of being separate from God. This egoism is what is called avidya, ignorance, and it is the hardest thing to overcome. The source of all evil, characteristics and actions. And power, he says, is accompanied by unbridled desire, seeking to humiliate others.
Haughtiness, he says, when this arises, one transgresses the path of virtue. It is a peculiar vice seated in the subtle body. I guess we can say all bad tendencies are part of the subtle body, but he says it's a peculiar one. And anger, he says, is about something unpleasant, because anger can come from different reasons, and he says that it's coming from something unpleasant, like we want to do this, but we can't do it. Somebody stops us or insults us or something. Then Shankaracharya adds, on behalf of Lord Krishna, moreover, they hate me, the divinity abiding in their own and other bodies, as the witness of their thoughts and actions, in other words, pure consciousness. Hating me means transgressing my directions. They are malicious and jealous of the virtue possessed by those who tread the right path. So even though they're not interested in the right path, if they see somebody doing good things, they don't like it. They feel, they want to do something bad to such people. So, Jnanadev, again, a little bit of hyperbole, but that's okay. If you just forgive him, or you just expect hyperbole from him, then it's okay. Then with big kettle drums and flags in front, they parade their own role of being the conductors of the ritual, but all in vain. With such false importance, their egotism gets increased. Like the black coating of soot renders the lantern darker, their folly thickens, their arrogance is heightened, egotism is doubled, and thoughtlessness is strengthened. So Amma has said that. She says that you can have the same light inside of a lantern, but if you allow the soot from the fire or the flame to accumulate inside that lantern, then you're not going to get much light out of there. So people who are so-called demonic, they have that same flame of consciousness and truth within them, but they're not cleaning the soot that's being created in their lives. So the divinity in them looks very dim. But Amma would say, no, they have the same divinity that you have, you just can't see it. So we shouldn't be too judgmental. Krishna is being judgmental just to scare us away from even looking at that path as an option. With the coupling together of egotism and power in this way, the sea of pride rushes past its limits. Then, with pride thus overflowing, lust also becomes wild, and its heat kindles the fire of anger. In that way, egotism gets strengthened, while pride gets shrouded in lust and anger. Then they are both united in demonic people. It looks like a recipe for disaster, right? All these things he's describing. Then he says that such people even torture their own bodies in different ways, like they do lengthy and very difficult ceremonies with the sole aim of just hurting other people. Why would anybody want to do that? Well, it has been explained that some of these rituals that are presented in the Vedas are there just for the sake of luring sort of, demonic people, I guess, to the Vedas. If you want to achieve your bad aims, you can pray like this, or you can do this ceremony. But at least it gets them interested in the Vedas. And the deeper they go into the Vedas, the more they realize that, no, I don't want to do the harmful ones. I want to do ones that purify my mind. And then once their mind gets purified, they realize that there's a much higher goal in life. So the the Vedas have something for everybody, even people like this. And he says, in this masochistic process, they torture the body in which I dwell as the Atman. The wounds inflicted on the body being felt as blows struck at me. So he's saying, whatever you do to these bodies, your own or others, I feel it. Whomsoever these people hurt, all that causes pain to me, since I abide in them all as sentience. So imagine you do something and then Amma says, why did you do that to me? You never told her that you insulted somebody. You were feeling a little guilty about it, but you never told, and you were like, it's okay. And then Amma says, why did you insult me like that? We would be like, oh my God, Amma feels everything. And how much shraddha we would have after that. So he's trying to hammer that point into Arjuna's head and our head. And I'm sure Amma would agree. A more recent commentary says, those of demonic disposition magnify every little merit found in them and claim to be qualified even though they are utter beginners. You ever met anybody like that? They'll volunteer, I'll do it, I know what I'm talking about, and then you say, okay, and it turns out they don't know anything about it, but they just wanted to be, the one who gets to do it. And he also says that they use their power to humiliate others. They cannot accept that God's presence is in the hearts of all. By sense indulgence and hurting others, their downfall is certain. Well, I guess we'd have to agree with that if they're that mean to people. Basically, Krishna is saying that they are embodiments of evil. Or you could say avatars of adharma, the opposite of what we want. The problem is that when one evil comes into our personality or our body or mind, all the other evils gradually find a way into our mind. It's like a spy who leaves the back door of the bank open, if there were such a thing, so his accomplices can steal something at night. So you have one vice and all the vices start to creep in. And Amma has said that the same is true with divine virtues. She says that if we have gratitude or humility or surrender, just one divine virtue, that one quality becomes like the queen bee, and all the other virtues will come to us like honeybees always follow the queen bee. And when we say evils in the plural case, it refers to nothing other than various aspects of one single problem. There's really only one problem. And that problem is, as Shankaracharya said, is ajnana, which is ignorance, the fact that we don't know who we truly are. And from there come all these symptoms like desire, anger, and greed. If you know that you're the Atman, you're not going to have any of those problems. So the first outcome of ajnana, or self-ignorance, is the feeling that something is missing. And don't we feel like that a lot of the time? If we didn't feel like something's missing, we would just wake up and just say, I'm going to bask in the glory of my being. And we wouldn't get out of bed. We'd take a shower, okay? We'd brush our teeth, and then we'd just sit there and be, oh, I'm God. You know, like Amma was like on the beach, and she just didn't want to go anywhere. She was like, I'm just going to take a bath in my own glory, you know. So that is proof. The fact that we get up and we bussy, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that. Oh, I forgot that. All these things show that we feel something's missing in life. And naturally, that makes us want to fill that vacuum, and that leads to all kinds of desires of all kinds. And based on our likes and dislikes. So you may have some, I have to do this, and I'll think I have to do that because that's what I'm interested in. And someone else will say, oh, I have to do a third thing because that's what their mind is programmed to do. It's all of our past life vasanas that determine it. And what happens when our desires are not fulfilled? We feel angry or sad. If we feel somebody has obstructed me deliberately, then I get mad. And if it doesn't happen for some other reason, I'll just feel sad. And what happens when our desires are actually fulfilled? We want it more, or we want it again. And that results in greed. So there's only 2 or 3 outcomes: anger, greed, and just depression, something like that. So one commentator said that depression is anger without enthusiasm. Maybe that's true, I don't know. Or we might just feel jealous of other people who have more of the pleasures that we want. It's like keeping up with the Joneses, basically. I got the latest BMW, he got the latest Porsche. The next guy down the road got the latest Rolls Royce. I mean, there's no end.
You know, they'll have a jet plane and then a yacht, and then it's like there's no winning that competition. So all the so-called evils are closely interconnected, and the root is kama, unbridled desire, or some people call it sensuousness. Not in a physical way necessarily, but just like you let your sense organs dictate how you live your life. You know, what you want to do and what you value. There's no higher motivation of like virtue involved. So that's what kama is. That's what it's a desire that doesn't care about dharma. We're not talking, like I keep saying over and over again, hearing the birds chirp. I want to go outside and hear the birds chirping. This is not violating dharma, right? So we can do that. It's an innocent desire. So I hope you can understand the difference. But because we're talking about unbridled desires and how dangerous they are, that's why the scriptures seem to be harping on the importance of relinquishing desire. So they're talking about the ones that are going to ruin your life. They're not talking about having a kid or something like that. It's the first link in the cycle of suffering for all human beings. So the scriptures, and even Amma says, it's best to uproot such dangerous and harmful desires at the beginning, rather than allowing it to grow and become huge. So the same goes for divine virtues, but in a positive way. Amma says it's best to inculcate them in children at a young age, because their mind is like a field with newly grown grass, soft, tender grass. You can make a path in it very easily. But if you wait until later on in life, it's like trying to make a path on a rocky mountain, like our minds are, because it's really stiff, and it's not easy to make a road on that kind of a place. So in this verse, like I said, egoism is more commonly taken as the variety of, like, he's so egotistical, he has a superiority complex, and he thinks he's great, that kind of egoism. Even though Shankaracharya made a good point in his commentary. Power doesn't mean necessarily physical or mental strength, but it's like a vicious use of some kind of advantage a person might have over others. They do it in poor countries. Sometimes the governments are corrupt, and they will use that corruption, the power, for corrupt means. I mean, it can happen anywhere in the world, I suppose. And so they exploit their power to fulfill their selfish desires. That's the kind of power he's talking about. And that means they will do it even if it means harm to others. So that's one big difference between Rama and Ravana. They were both very powerful physically and intellectually. I mean, Ravana was no dummy. He was very smart in the worldly way, and he used to do a lot of sadhana, a lot of rituals. He learned a lot, but his mind was corrupt. That's the problem. So his power was used for adharma, while his power was used for dharma. The same goes for Bhima and Duryodhana in the Mahabharata. We know that Duryodhana was like an avatar of adharma, but Bhima, even though he wasn't really, God realized, as far as I know, his power was not tainted with selfishness. He was hot-headed, but he didn't use his strength to hurt innocent people. And then when Krishna says detractors, we might wonder what that means. The connotation is that they are finding fault with something that is actually good. So there's a story that comes up in my mind. A reporter once asked Amma, "Don't the scriptures say that everything is within us? Then what is the need for all of this sadhana?" It's kind of like a lazy man's question. Obviously this person doesn't want to do any sadhana, or he's not interested. But at some point, we understand that it's necessary, and we feel that necessity. But Amma has to explain to this person why. So she said, although everything is indeed within us,
it is useless if we don't actually experience it. For that, sadhana is absolutely necessary. The rishis viewed all living creatures as being equal. They loved and served all beings without distinction. While they had the qualities of God, which is Ishvara, we have the qualities of a fly, which is Icha. Their Ishvara were Icha. A fly is attracted to dirty and stinky things like infected wounds, spoiled food, animal dung, etc. Similarly, our minds can see only mistakes and defects in others. This has to change. We have to be able to see the good in everything. Until we realize the truth, through sadhana and contemplation, there's no sense in saying that everything is already within us. Wow. I think that reporter must have felt like he was like a half-inch tall at that point. I mean, but she has to, because he's challenging, that reporter's challenging the foundation of all spirituality. How can Amma just say, oh, I don't know, whatever you like, she has to, and he's a reporter, he's going to write it down and publish it. So she had to really give him the tough love answer. And even if such people that are kind of negative, even if they read the scriptures, they will look for something that they can misconstrue or criticize, instead of being inspired by the lofty teachings. So that's why Krishna says, they hate me. No matter what I do, they hate me. Even though God simply represents the embodiment of all virtues. How can you hate virtues? Those who are full of vice are not attracted to such a God, or not even such realized beings. And the sad thing is that, as Krishna explains, he is referring to himself as simply the pure consciousness that abides in their very own body. It dwells in all bodies in the form of that feeling, I gotta do this, I did that, I'm here, I'm going to go to bed. That I is simply pure consciousness. How can you hate that? That's the irony of it all. We're going to hear more about that bizarre phenomenon in the next verse, verse 19. Tanaham dvishata kruran samsareshu naradhaman kripam yajasram ashubhan asurishveva yonishu. Now together. Tanaham dvishata kruran samsareshu naradhaman kripam yajasram ashubhan asurishveva yonishu. This one, actually, I don't think I changed at all. These, my haters. Oh, I did change a lot. I just forgot to track it. Sorry. This is what I came up with. These, my haters, the worst people, cruel as they are, I hurl them into samsara again and again, invariably in impure wombs of the demonic. I'm going to send this to one of our tech people there so they can actually post it on the chat window, because that's too much of a stretch to expect you to remember that. So
that'll show up in the chat relatively soon. I'll read it one more time. These, my haters, the worst people, cruel as they are, I hurl them into samsara again and again, invariably in impure wombs of the demonic. Doesn't sound like the kind of thing we would want to have happen to us. Shankaracharya says, because they are guilty of adharma, they are the worst. And when he says worlds, it doesn't mean like here and Mars and Jupiter like that. It's different paths of samsara, passing through many hells. Remember I said there's 7 levels of hell in the Hindu or the Sanatana Dharma cosmology. And when he says wombs of the demonic, Shankaracharya says wombs of the cruelest beings such as tigers, lions, and the like. Now I know tigers and lions are nice, they're cute, but we don't go near them because we know it's very dangerous. So Amma says you can share your love from a distance. Jnanadev says, now hear how I deal with those who behave in such a hostile way. They abide in human form, but turn their face against humanity, and therefore I deprive them of a human form. I make those fools abide in low orders that constitute the dung heap of misery. Wow. Dung heap is bad enough. Misery is bad enough. When you have a dung heap of misery, I don't know what's that going to end up being. I make them tigers and scorpions in wastelands that cannot grow even grass. Well, somebody has to be born as the scorpion. You know, if you've ever seen, that's suddenly reminded me, BBC, Earth, BBC, they have all these videos, fascinating videos. I remember seeing they had the theme was like deserts. And they show these animals that they can't escape the heat. Their feet are getting burned, and then they have to lift up 2 legs until their other 2 legs are burning, and then they put their legs in the switch like that. It's so hot. So maybe this is, and he says actually, you have to listen to the next sentence. They come to birth again in the same order over and over again. Or I give them birth as a reptile. So I guess that was an example. And scorpions are always in hot places too. So in this way, I do not release them from such miseries for extremely long periods of time, which even crores of kalpas would seem short. What's crores of kalpas? Well, it's definitely quadrillions of years. It could be 10 quadrillion or 100 quadrillion years. You don't even want to know how many zeros that is. Long time. This verse explains what happens to these people who hate the God within themselves. That's about as bad as it gets. Every vice they practice is an injustice done to the divine presence within their body. That is one reason why we apply vibhuti, sandalwood paste, and kumkum on our forehead, because we're trying to remind ourselves that the body is a temple. And when we remember that, it invokes that divinity that is dormant within us. So, you know, we're always divine beings, but we tend to forget it like almost all the time. So we need reminders. And that's what these traditions do. So just as we are on our best conduct in Amma's presence, we should consider that we're always in Amma's presence. Why not? And if we mistreat someone or hurt their feelings, it is an insult to the Amma within that person and ourself. Now, the only immediate story that came to my mind today to use as an example was many years ago, not long after I joined the ashram, so it's definitely over 25 years ago, more like 30. Anyhow, I was a new brahmachari, and the senior brahmacharis, who are my beloved brothers, they would always grab me to do seva. So that was happy. I loved doing it. So they sent me on a mission, go up on the roof of the Kali temple. In that time, it was okay for boys to go up there. So, and you have to find such and so, I don't know what it was. See if it's there. So I went up the spiral staircase and I was looking for it, it wasn't there. And then I found somebody else and they said, oh, that thing, whatever it was, is down there. You came all the way up here for no reason. And I said, okay, no problem. So I started going down the spiral staircase, and I got on the back side of the Kali temple, and I was on the veranda. I don't know if it's still there. I haven't been up there for decades. And you could see the whole back part of the ashram back then. Where the main hall is. I mean, you could just see from Kali temple all the way through. There were no buildings obstructing it. There were just a few huts. And I saw that one of my fellow Sevites, and he was coming towards me, and I had to tell him, no, it's behind you, the thing we're looking for. And I shouted to him from like the 4th floor, which is a dumb thing to do in an ashram anyhow. You don't do that kind of thing. But I was new and ignorant. And I said, la, 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 and I was like going like this. And then he pointed at me, he's going like this. And I said, because he can't hear me, he was about 150 feet away. And I said, no, it's over there. And he's going like this. And I was like, why do you keep pointing back at me? And I turned and he was pointing at Amma. She was right next to me. And I was shouting and making a big scene, flailing my arms like this. And I turned and then she's right there. She was like cracking up. She's like, this guy is just taking a long time to learn the ropes here, I guess. But I mean, even if Amma's not physically there, if we can get that habit of just thinking she's always there, that helps us to be on guard about all the trickery that the mind plays on us. So the remember of our inner divinity can be a deterrent against wrong actions. But the people Krishna is talking about now have no such conscience to stop them at all. So Krishna says they hate and insult me, though I am their very own self. And another way of interpreting that phrase, the worst people, is that, they're the lowest of human beings because they have no humanity in them. What's worse than that, right? You're a human, but you have no humaneness or humanity in you. So they have a human body, but they don't utilize any of the qualities or special capabilities that only humans have, like selfless service. Animals care for their babies, very dedicatedly, but they don't take care of somebody else's babies necessarily. I know we have some YouTube videos, they're doing it, but if you go out in nature, it usually doesn't work like that. Humans have the capacity for compassion, for transcending their lower tendencies and emotions. But if you don't use any of those unique gifts, what's the point in being a human being? So since they don't make proper use of their precious human body, they are proclaiming to the Creator, I don't need a human body anymore. I only need a body that allows me to eat, sleep, and procreate. So Krishna's like, okay, sorry, I didn't know that. I guess I thought you'd use it for better purposes, but okay, I have no choice but to throw you into the womb of an asura. Now, when we read the Puranas and hear these stories, like all the demons in the stories, Putana, like that, we see this. It's a caricature of a demon, basically, but it doesn't have to be like that. It can just be a lower life form, really. So it means the wombs of tamasic creatures, and some, like even a mosquito, it just goes around and sucks people's blood. It's a tamasic. It's considered to be a lazy or tamasic creature. And lions too. Apparently they sleep like 20 hours a day or something. We know pigs are tamasic. Sloth, well, the name says it all. Koalas are actually very tamasic. They sleep most of the day. And even if you go near them, they'll just pee on you. So it's like that's pretty nasty too. And of course, crocodiles are an example. These are examples of lower beings, you could say, because just a crocodile. I mean, it's their nature, of course, but they take their prey, drag it to the bottom of the swamp, and they wait until it rots, and then they eat the rotten flesh. You tell me, is that a higher life form or a lower? So it can even be on this planet, just a different kingdom or different aspect of life on Earth. So that's why we have various kingdoms in the natural world. In the 19th century, science thought there were only two kingdoms, animal kingdom and, actually I think it was 18th century. They thought that there were only two kingdoms, the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. And since then, it's been centuries, scientists have looked at the natural world much more deeply, and now they have divided the world into 6 kingdoms. Plants, animals, fungi, 2 different types of bacteria, and something called protists, Protists, which are, they're called the odds and end part of nature. So algae, some kinds of slime mold and things like that. But they have their own kingdom, right? How'd you like to be the king of slime mold? Right? Still, he must think that he's great, like I'm on the top of the heap, right? So everybody has an ego of some kind. And each kingdom is like a world in its own. You know, you can be the head of the bacteria or the greatest fungi in the whole universe, thinking you're great. So Krishna has to put the adharmic people in such worlds over and over until they understand the folly of their ways. And then they finally start seeking higher goals in life. So let's see how he goes about doing that in the next verse. Verse 20. Asurim yonimapanna mudha janmani mamaprapyaiva Kaunteya tato yantadhamam gatim. Together. Asurim yonimapanna mudha janmani mama prapyaiva kaunteya tato yantyadhamam gatim. This one I do think I really didn't change much. Failing to reach me, Arjuna, these deluded souls are born again and again in demonic wombs, thus falling into a still lower condition. So the commentaries, again, as usual, Shankaracharya says, these deluded creatures are born birth after birth only into tamasic wombs, passing into lower and lower states. Without ever reaching me, the Lord, they fall into a condition that is even lower than their present condition. Certainly, there is absolutely no chance that they will ever reach me. The meaning, therefore, is without ever attaining the right path as I have taught. We'll talk about that more. It sounds rather categorical and, too mean, but we'll see. Jnanadev says, demonic people sink to this vilest state, vilest or most vile state, on account of their demonic characteristics. Okay, we know that. After they reach their ultimate destination, I deprive them even of the little scope for solace they have in the body of a tiger or other wild animal. Then they become completely tamasic, a form of tamas that darkens even darkness, making it more gloomy. Now the next part is really humorous. You just have to take, his caricature of these things as kind of humorous, but also it makes a point. All these demons are dreaded even by hell itself. Their filthy contact makes dirt even dirtier. They are hated even by the sins themselves. And they are inauspicious even to inauspiciousness itself. So Saturn, is supposed to be inauspicious, like, no, you're inauspicious to me. The faculty of speech moans mournfully while trying to describe them, and the mind is repelled with a feeling of shock while remembering them. Therefore, Arjuna, you should never follow that path. Okay, I'm convinced. And then a more recent commentary says, the base nature in a person hurls them into states baser and yet baser. Like a stone rolled down the slope of a hill, he falls into the abyss of decadence. Wow. So what do we mean by deluded souls? I mean, it really means that they're confused about what gives happiness in life. That's the worst kind of confusion you can possibly have. And even if have a sense, you don't know how to attain it. So they have right and wrong completely backwards. And so no wonder they lose the human body, because they don't use all those God-given faculties, especially the discernment to follow the path of dharma. That's probably the single most important faculty we've been given. So they don't even ask about dharma, though there are plenty of scriptures available and at least one full avatar on the planet right now. In spite of all the opportunities to understand a better way of life, they don't make use of any of these faculties, so Krishna is forced to give them an even more potent treatment, as we talked about it, I think, last week. It's a treatment, over and over again. It may seem like a vicious, endless cycle, but the suffering experienced in their lower births does leave an impression on their mind. They still have a subtle body, they have a mind. It may be a electric eel mind or something like that, something that we wouldn't want to pet it or like have it as a pet, but it has a mind. And it's going to have experiences, and some of them will be nice and some of them will be bad. So that affects even animals' mind. And ultimately, they will awaken to a better way of life. Until then, Krishna says that they fail to reach him. Now, when we say him, we're talking about the Paramatman in the sense of Krishna, or Krishna in the sense of the Paramatman. When he's been describing himself as being beyond everything. Before this, a few chapters from 13 and on, it's always been fully something transcendental. So we have to take it in that vein, like Krishna Paramatman. Okay, they're not going to reach Krishna Paramatman so long as they have that negative attitude. Well, that's obvious, because even we are still trying to reach Amrita Paramatman. And that means we have some of those qualities that he's criticizing. Otherwise, we would have merged in Amma a long time ago. So we have embarked on the path of dharma, but moksha still feels very far away. Although Amma would never agree. She would never agree that moksha is really far away, but to us it feels like it's far away. Amma once said, "Children, know that the mind is the greatest mystery there is. But pure consciousness, the self, is not a mystery. Once you know the self,
you will realize that it is not a mystery at all. It is you. It is your own real nature. It's closer than the closest. The mind makes it a mystery. The mind is a complication that makes everything very complicated. Okay? That's pretty clear. And due to the mind complicating everything, both we and all the demonic people are equally non-realized. Another reason why we shouldn't judge the kind of people that Krishna is talking about. They're not God-realized, and we aren't either, not yet. The only substantial difference between us is that we have made a resolve to become a better person, whereas demonic people don't even feel the need to do so. I think they're already great. And if they become increasingly worse, a time will come when this world cannot provide the proper karmic experience they need. So they will be reborn in an entirely different dimension, some lower worlds. It's kind of like a naughty teenager being sent to boarding school or a military school as a last resort. You know, I can't deal with the kid here at the house. In this neighborhood, you know, he's never going to get out of his ways, so I'm going to send him to military school or whatever it is these days. And the purpose of such schools is, at least ostensibly, it is not to engage in sadistic punishment of a child. But it's the true goal is to help that boy or girl grow out of their naughtiness and behavior that is harmful to themselves and others. It will involve some pain, but the final outcome is growth and human evolution. Anyhow, life has enough pain already. So just like reform school doesn't last forever, hell also doesn't last forever. Though Krishna has put it in such a way like it's forever, 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 it's only in the sort of the relative sense. Our life maybe 80 years, if we're lucky, you know, and the afterworld may be 80 years or 100 years of heaven time, you know, which is much longer, supposedly. So he's converting it into human or earthly years, perhaps. Whatever it is, it's not forever. They will have to stay, or we will have to stay in heaven or hell only as long as our karma determines. After the karma is finished, there's no way that we should stay there. We cannot stay there, and there's no logical reason to remain there either, whether it's hell or heaven. All these explanations are just to warn people not to allow the vicious cycle to start in the first place. So if a person is wavering on the spiritual path, I mean, if you're not now, you may have in the past, or you may in the future. It happens to most people. At one point, is this really the right path for me? Maybe I made a mistake. Well, these kind of verses and descriptions and commentaries will help us to remember that it's actually much worse if we leave the spiritual path. And I shouldn't entertain any fanciful notions about, you know, going back to worldly life or whatever I used to do as a, you know, before I was interested in spirituality. We will remember that it's a whirlpool, and with each experience, the whirlpool only becomes more powerful. Just think, which one is easier, quitting cigarettes or not smoking cigarettes in the first place? I mean, quitting I hear is really hard. So it's an addiction, so it's better to just not do it in the first place. And this next verse gives us another warning, and it's the last of the verses that describe these demonic people. But first we have to hear a prelude from Shankaracharya. He's talking about the forthcoming verse. Here follows a summary of the whole demonic nature, in which the whole variety of adharmic qualities is comprehended. If one avoids the three that are the source of all evil, the whole demonic nature can be avoided. Wow, so just 3 things we have to get rid of, and then we're clear.
What are the three qualities forming the root cause of human downfall? ... Let's hear about that in verse 21. Trividham narakasyedam dvaram nashanam atmanaha kama krodhas tata lobha tasmadetat trayam tyajet. You know, when you pronounce this without stopping, the S, like lobas, comes. But when we're cutting it, it becomes lobaha, like that. So it's a little tricky, and I'm not well versed in Sanskrit enough to remember and teach you the rules, but that's why I said it like that. But now when we read it straight, we'll go through with lobas. Together. Trividham narakasyedam dvaram nashanam kama krodhas tata lobhas tasmadetat trayam tyajet. Kama, remember, unbridled desire. Anger and greed are the triple gates of hell, ruining the self, or we can say bringing ruin upon the self. Therefore, one should avoid all these three. All we have to do is uproot all our desires, anger and greed. Well, that shouldn't take more than a few minutes. Shankaracharya says, just by entering the gate of this hell, the self is ruined. Our self is already ruined then a million times over. It is unfit for all human goals. Since this gate is ruinous to the self, everyone should abandon these three: kama, anger, and greed. Well, let's say we'll put it there as the top thing on our list. That itself is progress. We have a lot of things on our to-do list, but do we include removing kama, anger, and greed? You know, that should be at the top of the to-do list. Jnanadev says, know that wherever these three predominate, one is sure to find abundant growth of evil. And a more modern commentary says, the nature of greed is to appropriate all objects of sense enjoyment exclusively to oneself. Any one of these three vices is enough to bind a person to evil doing. Woe unto a person who makes an alliance with all three, allowing them to rule his mind. They will not allow him to emerge from wickedness. Yeah, like one of them is enough, right, to ruin your life. So in short, all these demonic qualities should be avoided by all means. They're like quicksand. Once you are in it, you cannot get yourself out. Literally like addiction, you can't get yourself out of addiction. Only someone who is standing on firm ground can save you. All alone in this world, we are pulled up and down by our expectations, disappointment, sorrow, elation, due to all the fluctuations of samsara. But Amma is established in the self. We know that intellectually. But the practical outcome of that is that she will never be affected by the world. Nothing affects her. So she's not in the quicksand, that's the point, right? Since the world can never pull Amma down, the only possibility is that whoever comes in contact with her is pulled up, sometimes even against their will. I know some of us may have felt like that. We're stuck with Amma. Our ego might say we're stuck with Amma, but then when we wake up, we say, no, I'm so lucky I have Amma. Here's one story about somebody who didn't like it in the beginning. There was a devotee who came to see Amma in the very early days. I wasn't there. I think I was in junior high school at the time, maybe elementary school actually. And he narrated his story once in a satsang decades ago. When he got there were very few people, so darshan was like forever. And every time he would go for darshan, he would just cry buckets of tears. And it started to really bother him. It's like, why am I crying so much? This is really annoying. And so he decided that he is not going to go for darshan, because it was always when he went for darshan that he cried. So he sat a distance away from Amma, but just being in her proximity and seeing her, he started crying again. And so he was really upset. He's just, I can't deal with this. And then so he just didn't go anywhere near Amma for some time. And then one day Amma caught him and she gave him darshan, like mandatory. And he started crying again. And Amma said, why aren't you coming? And he says, because I don't want to cry. I keep crying every time I go near you. And Amma was laughing. So what's so wrong with that? He says, I don't like it. And she says, why don't you like it? And he says, why do I have all these tears? And Amma said, it's a good thing, because it's a sign that your ego is melting. So even against our will, she will purify us. But just keeping her close to our heart, we can maintain a more stable sense of contentment throughout our life. Just keeping remembrance of her. And everything else in our life becomes secondary once we have Amma as the foremost goal of our life. So that itself reduces all of our desires, anger, covetousness, jealousy. May not wipe them away completely, because we're not 100% devoted to Amma. Our devotion is divided between many, many things. So not completely purified, but a lot more purified than we were before. So this verse is just to highlight these three qualities. They're the most destructive, public enemies, 1, 2, 3, something like that. And remember, greed can mean the desire to have more and more, which is covetousness. And greed can, because English we don't have a second word for it really, it can also mean to cling on to what has already been acquired. I mean, the only closest word we have is like miserliness. And there's actually a nice story about misers that might make you chuckle, because it shows, how foolish we can be when we become really stingy. Once an old miser was complaining to his fellow miser, I had to buy a new toothbrush today. It cost me 87 cents. What? His friend said, why did you waste all that money? And then the older guy said, one bristle broke on the toothbrush, so I was brushing my teeth and one bristle broke off. And his friend said, what? You wasted your money just because of one bristle? And the old guy said, well, it was the last bristle on the toothbrush. That's how they live. So these qualities are so dangerous that Krishna says that they are gateways to hell. Remember, hell can be experienced as a human being on earth. Some people, we may in our lifetime, I would imagine at least once or twice, we've experienced a feeling that we can only call hell. Right? So it is, even in human form. Or after we leave this body, we can take another lower creature, an amoeba or algae, I think is one of those bizarre ones. Basically it's a different world, or it could be another dimension, literally a different world, not our solar system, a different dimension completely.
But whatever it is, these three will be the cause of our self-destruction. Now, don't get confused. Self-destruction is not referring to the Atma. The self there is like lowercase self. The mind, all hopes of, evolving as a human being. So that potential as a human being is being destroyed. That's all it is. So this verse is actually sums up everything here. It's a very important verse for us, and we can try to remember it all the time, especially when the mind is trying to make us do something that's not a good idea. Some people feel that anger is much harder to restrain than sensuousness or greed. But if they remember this verse, even when they start to get angry, they might be able to catch themselves before making a mistake. Now, this doesn't mean that if you control these three, you can embrace all the other negative qualities. No. It means that they are the seeds to all the other negative qualities, so all you have to do is focus on those first three. And if we tame those, we're clear. So, next week, we'll be covering the last verses of this chapter, and we will have a brief summary of the teachings, the overview. And so tonight we have a few other things that I want to share. First, I want to share that today is holy, and we have some beautiful graphics to share. And also, I have the answers to the questions that came up last week. So actually, maybe I'll do the answers to the questions first, and after that, we'll see the fun, holy pictures. Holy is H-O-L-I, not H-O-L-Y. It's just the name of a celebration in India. Now I have to find the answers to that. Yeah, there we go. So this is the question that came. There are only two questions, but they were really good. I wanted to spend a few minutes on them. The first one was about anger. A woman, no, that was something else. Yeah, I don't know this one, whether it's a man or a woman. I found myself more often getting angry at myself, especially when I do something stupid or without awareness. I even get angry at things like my computer, or when I cook. When it doesn't go the way that I want it, I get angry at the pot. Am I becoming insane? Yes. No, I'm just kidding here. Is there a way to transform this? Is karma created when anger is turned towards oneself or things? Okay, Amma has said that, anger anyhow is craziness for all of us. So we're all crazy, so don't worry. We're all insane. Because anger is so harmful to our own self that only a crazy person would allow it to happen. So we're all crazy. And all these things that you're talking about are not so uncommon anyhow. I mean, I don't get mad at pots, but I might get at something. I might get mad at something else, So everybody has different things they can get mad at, and even though they're like just inert objects. We don't get rid of anger because we are not truly convinced that it is bad for us. That's the problem. When we feel that something is really, truly harmful to us, we're not going to do it. Like sticking your hand in fire. Why would we want to do such a thing? But when we were kids, we didn't know that. We were just so ignorant. And we might have burned our fingers at one time. That's it. That's the last time. We're never going to touch fire again. So we're not fully convinced. We haven't, experienced it enough. It seems crazy. But there's some kind of attachment to anger. We're not really ready to relinquish it completely. So until we truly feel the harm that anger creates in us, we'll still struggle. But once we do feel that in a very painful way,
after that, it will be impossible for us to get angry anymore. Just like, we brush our teeth every day. We get out of our pajamas every day. We take a proper bath, or we at least change our clothes before we go to work. We're convicted. We're convinced. We're convinced that that's the right thing to do. Right? So we're not quite fully convinced that anger is bad for us. I have a bunch of Amma quotes which I'll share with you. You can follow up if you need more clarification. This is a story that took place around Amma. A devotee who worked in Rajasthan had arrived the previous night. He had a bad temper and was praying to Amma for help to overcome his anger. Amma obviously knew all of this because she knows everybody's mind. When he came for darshan, Amma said with a smile, "Amma feels that you have a little too much anger, son. If you feel angry again, this is what you should do. Put a picture of Amma in front of you and scold her. Tell Amma, is this anger what I'm getting by worshipping you? You must remove it right away. And if you don't, then take a pillow and punch it, imagining that it's Amma. If you want, you can even throw dirt at Amma. But son, don't get angry at others." And this man, he felt Amma's love so much that he just started crying. So anger became compassion, because how can I show that anger to Amma? Never. So that Amma's willingness to have anything done to her just to spare other people, that invoked the compassion in him also, and he started crying. And then Amma was talking with one of the ashram residents about his anger, and beautiful practical advice I just want to share. If anger arises in you, do not express it immediately. Leave the place. Go and sit somewhere by yourself. Contemplate and meditate. You will find that the cause of your anger is not in the other person, but within you. It is not the other person that causes it, but your past. The past is your reference book. Anger is within you. Someone accidentally touches the anger in you, and you erupt. Anger is like an infected wound. When someone touches it, you feel the pain. And if the touch is hard, pus and blood will come out, creating even more pain. Yes, anger is a deep, infected wound. It is a disease and needs to be treated. It needs your compassion and loving attention. Therefore, when someone gets angry, remember that he is a sick person. Do not make him even more sick than he already is. Do not let more pus and blood flow out of his wound. Do not make him experience more pain by pressing and squeezing harder and harder. That means we should not return anger. She's also said that anger is poison. There's a beautiful passage in one of the Upanishads. It's from a group of Upanishads that are called the Sannyasa Upanishads. And this one is called the Yagnavalka Upanishad. In verses 29 and 30, Yagnavalka teaches a nice technique to King Janaka and us through him. He says, if you have any anger against a wrongdoer, how is it that you do not have anger against anger itself? Anger is what blocks the path to dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. All the human goals, all the goals of human life are obstructed by anger. And then he continues by saying, my salutation to the anger against anger, which powerfully sets ablaze the foundation of anger and which gives dispassion and awakens one to one's own faults. Isn't that a beautiful thought? Who thinks of things like that? It's so beautiful. So basically, it's either conquer the mind or be conquered by it. And that's why Buddha said, it is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles. That victory can never be taken away from you. You may have heard of this very ancient, early Buddhist text called Dhammapada. It has a whole section on anger, which I'll just, take a few excerpts from it. Let go of anger, let go of pride. When you are bound by nothing, you go beyond sorrow. Anger is like a chariot careering wildly. He who curbs his anger is the true charioteer. Others merely hold the reins. They're holding the reins, but they're not a charioteer. With gentleness, overcome anger. With generosity, overcome meanness. With truth, overcome deceit. Beware of the anger in the body. Master the body, let it serve truth. Beware of the anger in the mouth. Master your words, let them serve truth. Beware of the anger in the mind. Master your thoughts, let them serve truth. The wise have mastered body, word, and mind. They are the true masters. The second question is, Amma said recently in Amrita Ganga, always try to maintain awareness of your true self. My question is, what does this mean practically, and how to implement this in my daily life? Well, like we were talking about it before in this class today, we need constant reminders of our divinity. So one of the most practical ways to do that is what Amma gives us early on in our relationship with her, mantra. Mantra japa is so important simply because we always forget our true self. And one major source of forgetfulness is an idle mind. And that's another reason to make mantra japa a constant habit, because if you're not chanting your mantra, some kind of tomfoolery is usually going on in the mind. Also, as much as possible, we need to avoid things, people, places, and environments that make us or lead us to forget our true self. Some places make you remember, some places make you forget. So anything that makes the mind overstimulated, disturbed, aggravated, stressed, and so on, these are the problem spaces we're talking about. Once the mind gets into such a mood, it will be very difficult to remember your mantra, not to mention your true self. But once you acquire enough inner strength, such places, such influences won't affect you anymore. But for now, avoiding such influences will make it much easier for you to maintain your peace of mind and, of course, remember your true self. Here I want to share some somewhat cryptic and occult, you could say, teachings from the Gnostic tradition. Not Gnostica, Gnostic, Gnostic. They were an ancient sect of Christianity, maybe even around before Christianity, but their teachings became based on Judaism and Krishna and Christ's life. So they have a lot of gospels that never made it into the Bible, and they were removed, and you know how it goes. Anyhow, the Gospel of Truth says, this ignorance of the Father's the Paramatman, the Supreme Being, brought about terror and fear. And terror became dense like a fog that no one was able to see. Because of this, error became strong. See, they don't say sin, they say error. It's just an error. You made a mistake. But it worked on its material substance vainly because it did not know the truth. It was in a fashioned form while it was preparing in power and in beauty the equivalent of truth. This then was not a human, so in other words, they were making their exterior beautiful because that was the only truth they knew. This then was not a humiliation for him, the Father, that illimitable, inconceivable one. For they were as nothing, this terror and this forgetfulness and this figure of falsehood, whereas this established truth is unchanging, unperturbed, and completely beautiful. If you're the, essence of the entire universe, what do you care what people say about you or do to you or try to do to you? And so they continue to say, for this reason, do not take error too seriously. Thus, since it had no root, it was in a fog as regards the Father, engaged in work and forgetfulness and fears. Since forgetfulness existed because they did not know the Father, if they then come to know the Father, from that moment on, forgetfulness will cease to exist. So it's very similar to Vedanta. Your whole problem is that you forgot the Father, who is your true self. But if you remember, if you realize, then all the problems are gone. Now, I don't know if it's okay to share this, because it's called The Secret Book of John, but it's on internet, so I guess it's okay to share it with you. Just listen to this. Just try to absorb it. Adam was brought into the shadow of death. They intended to make him anew. This time from earth, water, fire, and wind, which are matter. Darkness, desire, the artificial spirit, right? Matter is the artificial spirit, it's not the original. These all, in other words, earth, water, fire, wind, made a body. These all became a tomb, a new kind of body. So before, Adam's the first human being, so supposedly in the Christian tradition, his physical body was a new thing. So their physical bodies were not there at one point in time. That's the idea. Those thieves bound the man in it, enchained him in forgetfulness, made him subject to dying. He was the first descent and the first separation. So these thieves are the five elements. They made him bound to them. They chained him in forgetfulness. Because you're identified with this body, which is made up of the five elements. And because you identify with it, then there's something called death for you. So he was the very first person who came down into that. It's just a concept. It's not like an actual guy with an address. He was the first and the first separation from God because he identified with his body. And later on in the secret book of John, it says, the rulers took the man, rulers is all the natural forces, took the man and put him in paradise. They told him to eat freely. Their food is bitter. Their beauty is corrupt. Their food is deceit. Their trees are ungodliness. Their fruit is poison. Their promise is death. And then whoever the sage is who has written this down, it's John, yeah. So John is going to say, I asked the Savior, I asked Jesus such and so. I asked the Savior, what is it to be completely forgetful? And the Savior, we're presuming it's Jesus, said, he caused Adam to fall into deep sleep. Rather, Adam's perceptions were veiled and he became unconscious. As the Creator said, I will make their minds dull so that they do not see or understand. Then, a little bit later, John says, I then asked him, Lord, what of the souls of the people who do not know whose people they are? Where do they go? The Savior responded, in those people, the artificial spirit has grown strong, and they have gone astray. Their souls are burdened drawn to wickedness and cast into forgetfulness. It almost sounds like what Krishna is talking about. When they come forth from the body, I mean, he leaves the body, right? He's talking about reincarnation. Such a soul is given over to the powers created by the rulers, subtle powers, bound in chains, and cast into prison again. Sound familiar? Like something you heard a few minutes ago? Around and around it goes until it manages to become free from forgetfulness through knowledge. And so eventually it becomes perfect and is saved. The end. Happy Hollywood ending exists even in scriptures like this. So that brings us to a very fitting end, which is the fact that holy is all about the triumph of good over evil. So it's not an exterior thing, really, it's our own inner world. So let's see how people celebrate Holi with so much fervor and joy, because, well, I don't know if they're aware of it, but they're supposed to be thinking that by this, I am transcending all the evil tendencies in myself. Let's see how it looks. Look at that. Slow, 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 slow. You're going... Yeah, okay. How's that? I've been in that position once or twice. It's not my favorite position to be in. Okay, go. Poor guy. Or we can't even tell, man or woman. Yeah, next. Wow, that's a little overdone, but what to do? If you're out on the streets in Holi, I mean, you expect to get this. Okay? Just the whole town is red and orange, okay? Even little kids. At least they give her a pair of glasses, okay? So much powder in her hair, she just, wow, okay? What do you think? These guys are having fun or no? This is like heaven. All right, this guy's making a lot of money today. All right, next. I think this is the video. Is he got to switch to a different app? Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah, stills. Okay. And this is how I'm celebrate. So I think we have the video, right? Next. Okay. You know, if a stranger came and did this to you, you'd probably call the cops. But with Amma, you're like, hey man, throw more at me. Do it again. Do it again. Okay. This is in the Kali temple. They just make it completely covered with powder. Okay, next. Yeah, squirt me again, Amma, please. All right. So yeah, this is you're gonna do the video. Yeah, this is a beautiful video of Amma celebrating Holi, probably during North India tour. More volume. Just imagine you're getting squirted. It's holy. Amma's squirting you. Okay, with that, on that upbeat conclusion, let us chant the first two closing mantras, and those who have time can join us for a brief meditation. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha
samastaha sukhino bhavantu. Lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu. Lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Close your eyes, please. Check your posture. Try to keep the spine and neck relatively straight. And try to slow down your breathing process. With each long, deep breath, feel the body and mind relaxing further and further. Try to feel Amma's subtle presence all around you. Feel her arms embracing you, the warmth of her touch. And her pure love in your heart. As the mind becomes relatively peaceful, our ability to visualize becomes stronger. So let us take this opportunity to visualize people whom we may have considered to be bad people, evil people, or in this chapter, demonic. As a conclusion to the topic here in this chapter, and taking into consideration the teachings at the end, let us try to view such people as simply making mistakes. The error or the wrong understanding within them is the cause for all of their suffering and ours. But just think how much more they suffer than we do. Aren't they worthy of our compassion, our prayers? Let us visualize anyone that you have a disliking for, who mistreated you, has done bad things to other people. Try to see their form in your mind's eye and send them vibrations or thoughts of love, peace, forgiveness, and compassion. Maybe in some way our efforts will help them come out of that error that they have fallen into. And pray that they will soon come out of all that suffering they experience. Now let us conclude with the final prayer. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can slowly open your eyes if you wish. Om Namah Shivaya. I'm hoping that Amma will give her holy satsang. Well, all of her satsangs are holy, but this is for the occasion. Holy, H-O-L-I. I think she'll be giving it tomorrow morning, at least US time. Keep an eye out for that. And we will also see you on next Thursday to conclude chapter 16. Namaskar.